Hey, so we're going to take a walk down label lane. Reading labels can actually be really complicated, especially today. There's so many stamps of approval and certifications and nutrition fact breakdowns and just so many things that are on our labels now. It's really hard to know what's important, what to look at first, what do you need to know. And so I'm going to do a 3-part series on how to read labels. This first one is going to be the first thing that you need to look at when you pick up a product. The very first thing, and this will save you time, because if you learn this, a lot of times you don't have to go through the rest of the label. You can just know whether that's a product that you want to put in your body to fuel your body or not. And then a couple of the other videos will break down the macros and like how to run the numbers on a nutrition facts label. And then the final video, we're going to talk about like some of the stamps of certification and like what they mean and is it healthy, is it not? And so the first thing, and I kind of wish we were in a classroom because I would love to know what you think the very first thing you should look at is when you read a label. Like, what is the first thing you should look at? I wish I could ask you. So when you pick up a product and you're like, oh, I might want to try that product, but I really want to eat healthier, so I'm going to flip it around, I'm going to look at the label. What do you look at first? The very first thing that I want you to look at is not the nutrition facts, because you don't need to know how many calories are in a serving or how many servings are in this jar, or even how much fat or how much protein or how much sugar or how many carbs. Like, you don't need to know any of that before you look at this first. The first thing you want to look at is the ingredient list. So every label of a food product is required to have an ingredient list. They are required to list the ingredients in order of amount, so it's by weight. But primarily, if there's something in that ingredient list that you don't want to put in your body or that you don't recognize and it's not something you want in your body, you can put it back on the shelf. You didn't need to know that that product had 190 calories in a serving if it's not something you're going to consume. So this saves you time. Look at the ingredient list first. Now, when you look at the ingredient list, what are you looking for? You are looking for food, real food. You're looking for ingredients that you recognize, ingredients that your grandmother would have eaten, ingredients that your parents ate, ingredients that your great-grandmother ate. Like, you are looking for food, real food. And we have so many chemically created food-like substances, I don't even want to call them real food, that it can be confusing. But if you can identify what's in the ingredient list, then you don't have to mess with all the other stuff if it's not something you want to put in your body. So this one is real simple. It's just an almond butter, raw almond butter from Trader Joe's. So when I look at the ingredient list, the ingredients are raw almonds. That's it. I know exactly what is in here. There's no added oil, no added salt, no added sugar. It's just raw almonds. Now, not every label is that simple. If you can get more of your labels more simple, do it. That is how you read a label. But let's look at something that's a little more complicated. I didn't have a lot of complicated things in our pantry, but I have a few. So here, half my family is dairy free, and this is a nice treat that I get for one of my daughters who is dairy free. So the ingredient list in here, I'm not even worrying about the nutrition facts at this point. I'm just looking at the ingredient list. If I were to pull this off the shelf, that's the first thing I go to. And again, it saves you so much time, because if there's something in there you don't want to eat, put it back. Okay, so the ingredients are organic coconut milk filtered with water, organic coconut cream, rice starch. So those are the top ingredients, and that's what the primary, that's pretty much what it is. Now, it also says contains 2% or less of the following. So by weight, the coconut cream is the heaviest thing in here. So we have natural flavors, which a lot of people can get hung up on. I don't worry about it at this point. If you're trying to clean up your diet and just do better, don't worry about it. You can nitpick later. Don't nitpick now. Now's not the time. Unless, of course, you have a food sensitivity that you really need to dial things in. Okay, so calcium phosphate, which is just a fortified calcium, so that they can say Is it on here somewhere? Somewhere I want to say this has, it says it has more calcium than cow's milk or something like that. So it's a fortified calcium, so it's an added synthetic vitamin. Pectin, which is just to make it thicker. Dipotassium phosphate, which is a food additive for a preservative, which is considered clear by the FDA. It's still questionable, but it's not terrible. Locust bean gum, just to make it thicker. Live cultures to make it a yogurt. Citric acid, vitamin D, and vitamin B12. So for the most part, this label is extremely basic. Like, I recognize everything in here. Now, you might have to read this and say, oh, what's calcium phosphate? So you might Google that. Or what's dipotassium phosphate? So you might Google that. Google is really helpful for these things. And then you just decide if that's something that you're interested in consuming or not. But that's like, a product shouldn't have more than 1 or 2 ingredients on there that you need to check. And over time, you'll learn, you'll be able to look at that and say, okay, that's something I have deemed clear for myself, or that's something I don't want my family eating. But ultimately, you're going to learn some of those. But if you have to Google 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of the ingredients on there, then probably mostly a man-made product versus real food. So the goal is really to get real food. So here's another one. I picked more processed foods because those are the foods with labels, right? So here's another one. The ingredients are, again, I don't have to worry about the nutrition facts on here. I just want to go straight to the ingredients for the first time I look at a nutrition label. Ingredients: organic green peas, organic canola oil, organic rice salt, calcium carbonate, and organic rosemary extract. So again, we have another calcium carbonate is again a fortified calcium supplement, so that these can say they have 4% calcium in there. It's also somewhat of a preservative, but relatively clean. I can look at that ingredient list and see that it is, I recognize most of it, all of it. And so that is your goal. Now, if you start to see products that have like partially hydrogenated soybean oil, and you're like, well, I recognize soybean oil, but I don't recognize all these words in front of it, partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated, that means they've done somebody in a lab has done something. And when it's specifically talking about like partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated oils, that means they've taken that oil and chemically manipulated it so that it has a longer shelf life. And anything that's hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated is actually a trans fat. And I know trans fats were deemed bad years ago. So products have to say if they have trans fats in them, but they only have to say if they have trans fats in them if it's 0.5 or more. So if there's 0.5 grams of trans fats in a product or less, they can say it's trans fat free, but you're still getting those trans fats. And if you didn't know, trans fats actually are 1 molecule away from plastic. So you're putting those into your body doesn't recognize those at all. Like you eat it, it goes in and it's like, well, I thought it was peanut butter. There's some peanuts in here, so I'll take the peanuts and I know what to do with it. But this partially hydrogenated soybean oil, I don't know what it is. And so it tends to store it around our midsection. And so then we have this buildup of fat around our center organs because our body didn't know what to do with it. It was like plastic. It was like we've eaten plastic, and I was like, I'll just put it here. So things like that, where maybe you recognize part of the word or part of the food, but then there's this like a lot of scientific words in front of it, Google it. I know, Google is so handy, but instead of me going through all of it, the thing is, when you start Googling it, when you start doing the research, you're gonna learn it more. I can tell you all day long what's good, what's bad, what this is, what that is, but if you Google it and you start reading some of that information, you're gonna think through it a lot more. So I'm not gonna give you all the secrets, I'm just gonna tell you how to do it. Let's see, I think that's about all I had for you. Now, I think I'm going to talk about this in the third video, but like some of the oils And some of the added things that are added in aren't great options because they're either high GMOs or highly fertilized and things like that. But I don't think I'm going to go over that here. I'm right about 10 minutes, and I know that most people don't have a lot of time to sit down and watch videos that are longer. So all that to say, I'm going to wrap this up. This is the first part of maybe a 3, maybe a 4, if I keep going into it, maybe a 4-part series of reading labels and understanding labels. So I hope this was helpful. I would love any questions. Put questions in the comments below. If you have a label that you want to explore, drop a picture below and we can talk through it. Let me know if it was helpful or if it wasn't, or if you knew this or you didn't. So I hope you guys have an awesome day.